may or may not be different from other Oxfam?
Okay, so in fact, Oxfam International is a confederation of independent organizations, affiliates, about 20, and all of them are working in more than 90 countries all over the world. And I think what all the organizations have in common is that we all fight poverty and we fight inequalities. How do we do that? It's sometimes very different in the countries, but there is one common framework. There's one common strategic plan. So you have an Oxfam USA, you have an Oxfam Canada. In Europe, you have an Oxfam in France, in Netherlands, in Spain, in the UK, and also in Belgium. But you also have some affiliates in the South, and I think that is also very important. You have Oxfam India, Oxfam South Africa, Mexico, Brazil. And that was a clear strategy of Oxfam International also to have Southern affiliates. So I am working for Oxfam Magasins du Monde, which is one of the two Oxfams in Belgium. We're a bit complicated in Belgium always. But so I'm working for Oxfam Magasins du Monde, and I am there responsible of a department which is called Impact. And it's a department that is focused on policy, on educational work, on partnership relations, and on communications. And so Oxfam Magasins du Monde in C, it's a Belgian non-profit organization active in fair trade and awareness raising and education. And we are a movement of volunteers supported by a team of paid staff. And in fact, we have two main complementary activities. The first one is the commercial activities. So we have shops, we sell products, fair trade products, but also second-hand products. And the other branch is everything we do on education, awareness raising, and campaigns, mobilizing citizens and create awareness in Belgium about fair trade, but also more general about trade justice. So we have, I think, 2,500 volunteers who are organized in local shops, and also about 1,500 young people between 15 and 18 who are mobilizing in schools. So that are the most important activities of Oxfam Magasins du Monde.
Wow, that's truly inspiring, the kind of work that you're doing, and you're extending it all the way to mobilizing communication and conversations at a school level as well, which is very inspiring. Because it is so important that we target so many different levels and walks of life in our society, especially to propagate a better, purposeful, and more impactful movement forward.
Exactly.
I can't help but ask you this question, that you've been with Oxfam Magasins du Monde and Oxfam for quite a bit. And you've probably seen so many different movements throughout your career, throughout your time. And could you share some light on what sort of changes you might have seen in the way Oxfam operated and adapted to different crises? Because there's contextual crises, in particular demographics. There's a global crisis. There's climate change that's come up and resurfaced more normal now. So many of these constructs. How and what is it that's changed, and is it a positive change or not so positive?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, like you said, I started working like 20 years ago for Oxfam Magasins du Monde, and I have to say that I think I was very lucky to be able to grow also within my organization and to take up different functions in the organization. And I feel a bit like where I am now is, for me, sometimes I think like this is like the most beautiful job I can do, because I can work with a lot of other people. We have 14 people in my team to work on the policy, to work on the education and the awareness raising, and to work also on different publics. Like you said, I think it's very important. We try to focus on an adult public, but also on young people in schools. We even have a project in primary schools. And I think there's a challenge also not to also try to reach the not yet convinced, because I think that is a challenge for a lot of organizations. We often stay in our own circle. So to come back to your question, like what really changed, I think the world really changed a lot in the last 20 years, and I see some positive things. I also see some negative things, and maybe some changes can have both. And then I take up my Oxfam hat. I think if there's one thing that is really striking me is that inequalities are really increasing. I think we are living in a world where the concentration of power, also in supply chains, is bigger and bigger and bigger. I think in fair trade itself, also a lot has changed in the last 20 years. I think that, well, at least that's what they told me in the beginning. My organization is there since 40 years. People in the beginning, they bought a product because they wanted to support a political action. They didn't want specifically a good product. And I think that completely changed. I think, and I'm happy for that, that fair trade is not a charity. It's about trade. And I think that the whole charity issue, that is gone. So I see that as a big change. I think a lot of improvement has been made also on products. They always told me that in the beginning, people bought wine we sold, but he was really very bad. In fact, you really had a headache, but people thought it was important to support that. I think this is finished. And I think producers and partners really invested also a lot in improving the product quality. I think a big change as well is that you find now fair trade products in much more channels than before. I think before you had these traditional fair trade organizations, and now you see the products also in other shops, in organic shops, but you also find it in supermarkets. I'm not always convinced that it is a clear strategy for them to make the world a better place, but I think it's a good step. Of course, if you have one range of fair trade products, then you can also ask your question, what about the rest? So I think you have like positive and negative things. A big change for me as well in the fair trade sector is that you don't have this north-south division anymore. I think fair trade really started as, to put it a bit blunt, the poor producer in the south, and then the products were bought by the awareness-raised consumers in the north. I think this is now completely changed. I think fair trade has no boundaries anymore. You have fair trade producers in the north as well. We started in Europe with fair trade products, at least in my organization, already like 7 years ago. So the north-south division is not there anymore. And I think that's a good thing, because we are tackling a global problem. So I think the solution has to be global as well. And I think you have producers in the north that has to be supported. And I think you have also a lot of consumers in the south. What else I see? I see that I think that more and more people are aware of, and I think specifically now also, I mean, we have been talking a lot about climate crisis now with the COVID. I think that more and more people are aware that there is something definitely wrong with our model. Also young people. I think if you look at the success of a young organization like Fashion Revolution, who made the campaign like Who Made My Clothes, I think that is really fantastic. They really reach a much more younger public. I see a big international movement of fair trade, the World Fair Trade Organization, which is growing, has increasing members. So I think that is very positive. But I think we still have a very long way to go. But that is the challenge, I think. And that is also, I think, what is driving us. We see some clear success stories of how people really make a difference in life of a lot of producers. But if you take then the total of what is representing fair trade in the context of the global trade, then you can only say that we still have a long way to go.
so well put together. I love how you looked at so many different aspects of it and that whole journey of change, how things are gaining traction, yet there are certain perils of gaining traction too. And like you said, it is absolutely brilliant to see a product of fair trade quality. And mind you, I say fair trade quality now instead of, sorry, instead of just a fair trade product, because again, we're not contributing to charity, but we're contributing to what is actually a good product and good quality.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm happy to see that change. And today I can just go to the supermarket and buy a fair trade coffee, and that's what I drink all the time. I drink fair trade coffee, and I'm proud of it because I think that is the best coffee I can buy at the supermarket. But
Yeah.
not just because I want to donate to charity, because I can do other things if I have to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely true. And it's so true that the fair trade movement and the impact is also growing across borders, and the global solution is really starting to surface. And it's interesting because in Australia, Australian Oxfam had a retail arm, but actually they don't exist anymore. So I'm just keen to know. So how does it work in Europe, for example?
Yeah.
And how do European consumers respond to the fair trade model?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I had a lot of contact with some people in Oxfam Australia in the fair trade. So it was really a very sad to know that they had to stop the fair trade activities. But for us, like I said in the beginning, it's really like one of the main actions we have within my organization. We always say, if I should describe very shortly what is doing Oxfam Magasins du Monde, we do like 4 big things. We denounce unfair practices. We propose concretely an alternative. We create awareness, we do campaigns. And then finally, we also want to lobby, but together with others, because we are a small organization. So we do that together with the Fair Trade Advocacy Office or within Oxfam International. We also want to lobby political and economic actors. So for us as an organization, to have shops is an essential part of our mission. It's like really showing that there is an alternative, that there is a concrete alternative if you want to consume or fairly products or even secondhand. I think there's also a vision of reuse and the circular economy. I think that is also important. We are anyway in this kind of society where it's apparently if you consume, you don't really think about it anymore. And we really want people also to think about consumption. Do I need it? And then what is behind the product, and who made a bit the slogan of fashion revolution, who made my clothes? Like, is this coffee I buy, is it bitter? Is it tasting bitter? The chocolate, is there something? So for us, having shops is really a very important part of a mission. And I think that is also what is driving our 2,500 volunteers, because they are in, say, running the shops. We are 60 paid staff, we are supporting them, but they are the ones who are in the shops. And I think for people, it's important to show that you can act, you can do something, you can buy fair trade products. So for us, the retail action is very, very important. Now, to come back to your question on European consumers, I cannot really say something about European consumers. I can maybe say something about Belgian consumers. Even if I think that, well, you have it in my country, you have a French-speaking part, a Flemish-speaking part, but I think in C, we are very similar. So we don't have to exaggerate the differences. What is interesting for Belgian consumers is that in Belgium, the notoriety or the recognition of fair trade is quite high, in fact. Every year, the Trade for Development Center in Belgium is doing a study on how do people see fair trade. If they hear the word fair trade, they think about what kind of product or brands. So the recognition is quite high. But that doesn't mean necessarily, unfortunately, that people buy fair trade. So I think that is a very important point. We see, if we look at who are our clients, I think the Belgians, the most sensible to fair trade are women between 35 and 55 years old. Unfortunately, and that is a big challenge for my organization, specialized also in non-food articles, is that a lot still fair trade is just equal food products. People think first of all of coffee, of bananas, of chocolate. And it is a challenge to also show that we have a complete range, in fact, of non-food products. What is interesting, and I think that is something that really changed in Belgium, in the perception that Belgian consumers have, is that today, sustainable consumption is not necessarily directly linked with fair trade. And I think that is something very important to keep in mind in my organization, is that for a lot of people, if they think about sustainable consumption, the first thing they think about, it's about local, and it is about short chains, short supply chain, which is, I think, for us a challenge as an organization. And I think we really try to work on that, because for us, a short chain is not just about the distance. It's really about how many people are in the chain. And I think that the challenge is to explain to people that it can be, even for the environment, which is a very big, important challenge for us as well, is that it's not necessarily the transport that is making a product better or not. It's really how a product is produced, and also the price that has been paid to producers. But it's more about the producing process. But at least for us in Belgium, it's a challenge to also explain that fair trade is also a short chain, because you don't have all these intermediate people who try to have their margins. And but that is a big change, and I think this is the whole change where fair trade went through, about northern fair trade, also local. And we think it's very normal that we also work together with local producers. But it's not because it's local that it's also good. It has to be also, the whole social aspect of fair trade should not be forgotten.
That's a very interesting point, especially about the short chains, because oftentimes with the emergence of sustainable consumption, it is so important to think and track, okay, if my product is traveled, 3,000 miles by airplane, that's a huge amount of carbon emissions. Or if it's traveled by ship, okay, there's oceanic problems. That doesn't change.
Yeah.
It is so critical. Is that something that you are thinking about at Oxfam as part of the fair trade process? Are you trying to think about how to marry the two ideologies? So maybe have sustainable consumption at a local level.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we started selling Northern producers products, so products produced in Europe already in 2013. So we started working with producers in France, now also in Portugal, in Italy, in Greece. And I think what was important is that we work with the same fair trade principles, and that is important. It was for us sometimes very obvious to make some choices. Before, we had apple juice coming from somewhere in Latin America. We have a whole sector of apple industry in Belgium. So it was very obvious for us to start working with local producers in Belgium to have apple juice that we sell now in our shops, but with producers who have the same vision, who work in and respect the same principles of fair trade like our southern producers. But it's very obvious, yeah.
Yeah, that is true. I think at the core, the principles have to stay strong and the movement has to stay strong, because effectively everybody is equal at that level. and
Yeah.
users are given that level of respect and not, you know, the sort of disparity that you see in a very industrial setting. So that's
Yeah.
very interesting. And actually, that leads me right into the next sort of discussion that I want to move towards, which is try to give us some idea of some of the communities that Oxfam works with, and that you work with in Belgium, or if it's around the world as well, actually. But what sort of work do you do with these communities, and what are those relationships like? Especially in
Okay.
COVID and everything, we're looking at the power of connection and the power of connectivity, no matter where you are. So, yeah, please give me some idea about it.
Okay. So Oxfam Magasins du Monde, we are, if you look at our shops, we sell food products and we sell non-food products, which means crafts, textiles, cosmetics, but we are specifically specialized in the non-food. So we don't import directly food products. We work with about 30 partner organizations from the South, so Africa, Latin America, and Asia. So the relationship, the first relationship we have with them is a commercial fair trade relationship, which means that we buy their products, we import them, and then we sell these in their shops. If you look at these 30 organizations, they are mainly WFTO guaranteed members, but we also work with organizations that not yet have the guarantee, because I think it's a work in progress. It's a development. I just want to say that, and that is also how we think about certifications and labels. It's like, it's a good tool, but it's not an entry or not. So, but mainly them are WFTO guaranteed members. So it means that we work in respect of the 10 principles of fair trade. We have a kind of internal partner commission, which is composed of volunteers that is doing together with us the monitoring of these partners. And that is important because we really want to involve also volunteers in that work. If I look at the organizations, in fact, they are very diverse. We work with big organizations, but we also work with very small groups, with a group in Burkina Faso. I think it's 30 women. If I think of a partner in Bolivia, Kipania, that's also 30 women. But we have other groups in India. I think of CRC. I think they work with 63 groups and 5,000 families. So it's very diverse. Also, the structures are very diverse. We have some cooperatives, we have some private companies with a social benefit. So what we have in common with them is we have a commercial relationship with them, respecting the fair trade principles. That's the first thing. What we try to do is, with some of them, we try to do more. Not with all, because we don't have the capacity, but we try to do also some collaboration on educational work. And what we did, for instance, some years ago, is that we worked together with some partners in India and Bangladesh on a campaign called Fair Chances, about gender. And we thought it was interesting, instead of just us in Belgium inventing the objectives, the tools, we thought it could be interesting to think about that with our producers, who also do a lot of educational work on the ground. So we try to do that together. So that is a second kind of relationship. And what we also try to do, I don't know if you can call it a relationship, but we also try to invite every year. Now with COVID, it's not possible, of course, but normally we invite once or twice a year a producer group to Belgium to meet volunteers, to go to schools, to talk to young people, to try to reach also the press with the journalists. And I think, and maybe that is then one of the success stories, is that it's so important that also for volunteers, it's part of their commitment and engagement. And I think that it's so important that we have this connection of a product, a producer, and then a consumer. And I think it's important to link that. And we see that it's very important for the motivation of volunteers as well, because then they see something very concrete. I mean, we can explain, and we explain the whole time what we are doing with partners, but having a partner organization in our country and meeting everybody is also very important. Like I said, we are a small organization and we try anyway every year as well to support one specific project of a partner in the South. Like for instance, this year, this year will be support for COVID. But every year we focus on one project, and this weekend, in fact, we have a big action, which is the Fair Trade Breakfast, which will be a special corona-proof thing. So normally we have 30,000 people in one weekend having breakfast together in 200 places. Now we cannot do that, so it's a takeaway. Like that, we try to collect money to support this year a project of one of our producer groups in Chile, Pueblos del Sur, because they want to create in Santiago a local shop with fair trade products. So we thought it was very interesting to also support, because that is also one of the challenges, I think, is to find market in their own country and not just to export. So I think that's more or less how we work with our partners.
That's a diverse group of a diverse way of working with different groups, and like you said, I mean, it is definitely certainly challenging when you're predominantly volunteer around and you have only limited means. But it is very inspiring that no matter what, you are still going ahead with whatever is possible, and you are continuing to create to extend that chain of value creation, that chain of impact to wherever you can, and that's wonderful. And I love the idea that the producers also, you invite them and they come and be able to communicate with everybody, because that human connection, I think, is often undermined, and it is so powerful when you actually meet. So one day I wish I could meet the producer of my coffee, because I could see that sort of brand of coffee, and if I got to meet the producer, I'd be so intrigued to understand what went behind the making of the process, and then you really have a lot higher appreciation of it. That is absolutely wonderful. And you already touched on all the key sort of success stories, but do you have any story that might come to your mind? One where, you know, you were able to potentially collaborate with a partner or a producer, and anything around the community as well. Any success stories you have to share from Oxfam?
Yeah. Well, I have some success stories in my head, but then I think, like, if I just mention these one, it's not very fair until towards all the marvelous groups. To pick up, I talked already about the campaign, the Fair Chances campaign we did together with partners in India and Bangladesh. I think it was very, very interesting to see that we work in fair trade, but we also work together on a campaign. And it was interesting because to talk with our producer groups also on their educational work and how they want to do awareness raising on gender and empowerment. And I think if you look at the craft sector, it's really about women and it's about women empowerment. And I thought it was really very interesting that we could, and it was different how we did it. I mean, the activities finally we did in Belgium were very different maybe than the activities they did in India and Bangladesh, where they worked more, one of the partners really worked with theater and other kind of conferences than we did. But I thought it was really, really interesting to work together on a content. But then I see so many, I mean, if I look at these partners we work with, and I think, for instance, we work with TARA, which is a fair trade organization in New Delhi. They really make a difference in the daily life of so many people. But I can say that for so many producer groups we have. But if I look back in Tara, I mean, they work with 500 artisans. What is very interesting, I think, in their work is that they have a very holistic approach of fair trade. So it is about better working conditions and living conditions, but it's also about empowerment, it's about gender. They also have a very interesting project on sustainable agriculture. They invest now a lot of effort in the zero waste activity. So I think the climate change is really a challenge for all of us as well. But so I really think if I look at the work they do on the ground, it's brilliant. We work with Core Jute Works in Bangladesh, which is a group. 95% of the members are women. They work with natural materials and they make beautiful products, but it is there. I mean, it's work, it's pay. So it means that people can live in decent conditions. They can invest in education. I also think of, we work with ALPA in Peru. They are doing a lot of work on the traditional techniques. They work with alpaca, very impressive. I think of CRC, which is one of our producers, maybe one of the, they started in the 90s, I think. They are based in Calcutta. They work with 63 groups, and I think they made it possible that 5,000 families now are economically independent. They invest in training of people. They invest, sometimes I think fair trade, it's not just about the trade, it's also about the empowerment. And I think you have the empowerment, it's about economic empowerment, but then it's also about more general empowerment of women also, but also of men. I don't think it's just a question of women, it's also about men. They invest on product development, they try to be innovative, very creative. So yeah, I think that it's not even fair just to list these 5. I think of so many other producer groups that really make a difference, I think, in the daily life of people.
That is very, very nice to hear, actually. And that leads me into wondering, how do you go about, because there's so many organizations around the world, so many different kinds of producers producing, you know, a whole range of things. There's going to be handloom, there's going to be grassroots levels, and some that are impacting more communities than the others, but some doing just as much work. How do you choose who you partner with, or is that something you rotate over time?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that it has been, it grew with the history of Oxfam Magasins du Monde. I think we started, I was not there. We started 50 years ago with some producers, some traditional actors, and some of them are still there. Huh? And then it grew. I think we also work within Europe, within the European Fair Trade Association, the EFTA, where we exchange information. And I think it's something that has grown. Or product managers see a product that they really want to have, and then we see if it's really about fair trade. I think the challenge, and I think sometimes the drama, is that, and I think that is one of the challenges as well for producers, is to find market access. I mean, we are such a small organization. If it would be possible, we have much more partners, we sell much more, but we have 60 shops, and it is a challenge to find market access. So I feel that we say more often no to a new collaboration than a yes, because I think it's also very important as an organization to stay focused as well. And the idea is we can only buy a product if we are sure that we can sell it. So it has to be a good product, but it has to be also a project in respect of the fair trade principles. But like you say, I mean, WFTO has more than 400 members, and I think there are more than 300 fair trade organizations we have a lot of demands of other also very interesting fair trade organizations to be a partner and to buy their products, to sell it, but we are not in the capacity to do that yet. So we really have a challenge also within my organization and within Belgium to try to grow. But I think, well, you will come back to that later. The COVID situation is not making it very easy. So
well put together, actually, and I love how your answers are literally leading me into the next question that I have to ask you, because what I was going to ask you next is, in fact, what the impact of COVID has been on Oxfam Magasins du Monde, and how it has been in terms of you being able to consistently continue to associate yourself with these partners, to be able to practice, because I think it's so challenging right now. So many businesses are shutting down, you know, things are crumbling around us. And a lot of countries going back into second lockdown. It is so difficult because you just came out of that, you started to grow, and then suddenly you're dipping again. It's just falling off a cliff a second time. So what has been that impact on Oxfam Magasins du Monde and generally its partners?
Well, I think for my organization, like I think a lot of other organizations doing trade, it's very, very, very hard. It's very challenging. In Belgium, we had a first lockdown from mid-March to mid-May. So very concretely, what happened in March, in that 2 months, we had to close all our shops. A lot of the staff was put on temporary unemployment. We had to cancel all our events. We had to delay our campaign. We wanted to start our new campaign on the donut economy, which I think is, especially now in this COVID time, a very interesting model to explain, like, how can we live respecting the social foundation and the environmental boundaries. So we had to delay that because we were in a lockdown, which means that concretely for the organization, well, we lost 2 months of turnover. But then from mid-May, we could open again. So little by little, I think June, July, August, I thought we were like, well, we had reviewed all figures, of course, but it was like, it was slightly okay. But now since 2 weeks, we are again in a second lockdown, and that makes it very, very hard. The difference in strategy now is that our shops are still open just to sell food, because food is an essential product. So we can continue to sell food products, cosmetic products, but we cannot sell any crafts. And I think for an organization, well, we have Sinterklaas, we have the presents for the end of the year. Not be able to sell crafts now is really, really a big problem for my organization, because November and December are one of the most important months. So what we are trying to do now is to sell crafts anyway through a system of collect and go. Oh, it's a bit technically, but I mean, we really try to anyhow keep on selling crafts, but it's more difficult because the shop is not open. A lot of our events that we planned have been rethought. So we have luckily invested more in the digital strategy, but I mean, it's still a big challenge. I mean, we have a part of our products that we sell also through a web shop, but that's still very marginal. The most important sales are in our shops. So that's very, very challenging. Also, our program in schools has to be stopped because now schools are partially open, depends on the age, but at least normally the students we work with only go 50% to school. So, and it's understandable. I mean, schools don't want to take any risks, so they don't want to allow externals to come in. So we really have to rethink also or educational strategy, that is for sure. But I think the most important thing now is about the selling of the end of the year. And I think as a lot of organizations, it's all about the cash flow. So we have, this is something that is follow up now, like weekly by the organization, by the Financial Commission. It's very, very challenging. And I think then we are still in Belgium where we have, when I said people are put on temporary employment, I think here we have a kind of social system to support, even if you still have a part of your salary because of the support of the government. But it's very, very hard. And I think we really try to review the big event we have now this weekend with the breakfast. We did the whole formula, a takeaway. But it means like ordering online and so, but we'll see. We try to be creative, to be innovative, but the financial situation is really very difficult, as a lot of fair trade organizations now. We will see what it gives next year. I think it will not be finished in 2021. So I think we need to rethink a lot of our strategies. And then I think if I see, because you also asked about our partners, I think it's terrible. I think our partner organizations are also really, really suffering and struggling. I mean, in the first lockdown in March, they couldn't even produce. I mean, there was no enough raw materials. They couldn't produce. There was no transport. And I think for a lot of producer groups, it's very simple. There is no work, then there is no pay. But I think what is very interesting, and that is for me then again the big difference if you look at conventional markets or conventional actors, and I refer to the action that was done yesterday by the Clean Clothes campaign also in Belgium. The big message to Primark, to H&M, pay your workers. I mean, that is the reality as well, I think. And that is also some of the producer groups I mentioned, like ALPA, CRC, are doing so much to help the producers and to advance and to make sure that people can still buy food, for instance. It's so basic, but I think a lot of fair trade organizations really made a lot of efforts to make sure that these people were not left behind in this COVID. But I mean, we also bought less as an import organization. Huh? We were closed in March and April. We have so much stock, so we are not able to buy a lot of new stuff now. So I think that's also a very big issue now for producers in the South, is that they will have less orders. We try to help. Also, we try to collect 30,000 euros to support some of our producer groups for like basic needs, make sure that with a certain amount of money that we gave to one of our producer groups in Indonesia, they will be able to feed everybody for 1 month. It's very basic, but it's very challenging, I think. And I think what is for me the bottom line is we are now in this COVID thing, and we are in the big climate crisis. I think that if I try to see something positive, I try to be always positive, but it's a bit difficult in the COVID times. But anyway, I think all this kind of crises, also as COVID, I think bottom line shows that we are today in a kind of model that is not sustainable. I mean, the model of production, consumption, and even trading, it has to be changed. I mean, we are like, if you look at the climate change and the way we produce non-fair trade, it's a catastrophe. And I think that all these crises really show that, and I hope that more and more people are aware of that, that we need to change definitely that model of unsustainable consumption and production.
I completely agree. I think these times have tested us at so many different levels. And it is true. The thing is, a lot of people aren't being looked after. A lot of people don't have that safety net under them. Some from the government, some from their own employers, but there are employers that are just pulling the plug saying, hey, I'm taking the rug and putting myself. because I'm feeling cold, but you can stay out in the cold. And that's not fair. That's absolutely not. It's great to see how you are looking at it and how the partners that you work with, the producers that you work with, are actively on the ground, going out and seeking to ensure that everybody is equal, everybody is taken care of. I think collaboration is so critical at this point. But like I like how you said, because I kind of resonate with the idea that I try to be very positive and try to be cheerful all the time. But it is so difficult when you have these looming crises over your head. You know, the cloud is just waiting to start raining, but it's right there. And on that sort of topic, I just wanted to ask, just as a sort of closing remark, what message would you want to propagate in your position? And to people who are going to view this interview, what message would you like to share about moving forward in a more positive light and hopeful for the future? Because I think we although there are a lot of these things, we do have a lot that we can work on. And there is a lot that we can develop into. I guess it's a lot of support, it's a lot of helping each other, it's a lot of being more mindful and all of these things that we think of. But what would you, Sophie, be able to share with the viewers? Your 2 cents on this.
Well, I think, first of all, I think what is difficult for all of us is that there is so many uncertainty. And I think that as a human being, we like to be certain about things and we like to control things. And I think that we have to try to live with a kind of uncertainty. And I think then also as an Oxfam organization, and try to continue the work we do. I think the kind of essential mission we have of constructing social, economic justice, fighting inequalities, fighting poverty. I think if you look at the COVID crisis, the climate crisis, I think that poor people are much more hurt by this kind of crises. So sometimes I think that all these crises really, really show that we need to change the system. We need to work on another model. And I think that means we need to continue the work we are doing, but also try to rethink also, how do we do it? I think we need to be more creative, more innovative, put more efforts on digital, try to reach the non-convinced. I think I said it earlier, we are very comfortable when we all talk with people who agree with us. And I think we need to reach out more, we have to network more, we have to more collaborate. And I think for me, the change can come, it's an and story. I think as an individual, you can also make choices. Me, in my family, with my kids as a mom, I try to make them understand that you can choose. If you consume, it's also for me a kind of political act. And I think it's important that you ask yourself, who is behind this product? How is it made? I mean, I don't feel comfortable wearing a sweater where I know that people were not even paid for what they did. So I think as an individual, you can do a lot, but I think we need to also work in groups. And that is why I think the work my organization is doing is so important, because you need to have also a collective action. And I think do the awareness raising, going to schools, that is very important. And I think then it's very interesting for us as an organization to show a real concrete alternative. And I think we also need to push politicians to take up their role, because I'm still convinced that it's very nice, all these certifications and labels and voluntary schemes, but in C, I think we just need laws. We need laws that say to companies that we need to respect human rights. We need to respect the environment. I think it's sometimes, it's so bizarre that you have to put a label on a product saying that it's fair, that it's not about exploitation. It should be the other way around, I think. So for me, it's like, I really pledge that we continue and be more, reach out, not just be in our fair trade model, but reach out with other organizations working on environmental issues or other social issues, and to create a kind of mass that will make a difference. And I'm sure that companies, they are very sensitive about activities of consumers. We have seen it 2 years ago when we did a big action in a very commercial street in Brussels, where we wanted to have one brand to show more transparency in the agreement of Bangladesh and show their list of people they work with. They didn't want to do it, but finally they did, because there was a lot of pressure on consumers. So for me, there's a kind of pledge to continue and to work more together. And now, first of all, the first priority is to make sure that we will survive as an organization this first or second lockdown and the COVID situation.
That's so many great points that you pointed out. So many important things that we need to talk about. And I think I'd like to just echo what you said about the fact that we're even labeling products as fair should not be the case. The ideal case and the normal should ideally be us not having to label that at all and knowing that everybody's treated fairly. But unfortunately, things have gone so many different ways in the past, and I think we just have to move forward into a better future. And for that, I really thank you so much, Sophie, for really taking time out, being a part of this conversation, sharing so much about your journey and Oxfam Magasins du Monde and how you work around all of this. And I'm sure people who are going to see this will be so inspired and so motivated and very informed, because like you mentioned earlier, education is so critical. Information and being informed about all these different things is so critical, because that's what